Flashing in my pocket so my pennies should be what they selling is cheap. So I'm buying that this freedom is free. I've been becoming me. See when Jesus taking the lead. With purpose I bleed and rise like going under the heat. Defeat is a never. You can't reattach with a sever. What's bringing you pleasure can tell you where you stacking your treasure. When storm is your weather, know that it gets worse for it's better.
Welcome to the Esau McCaulley podcast. I'm your host, Esau McCaulley. And apparently, I do not always introduce the producer because you're the producer, not the co-host, but that's okay. I'm going to
You can still introduce me, Esau. Okay.
I'm going to introduce Mike Strelo.
You've never said my last name before.
Your last name.
Mike Strelo. Yeah.
Mike Strelo.
It's great to be here, Esau.
It's good to be here. And this is one of those times where, like, an internet friendship burgeons into real life. I first started seeing Marie Beecham stuff just on Instagram, and it was so consistently interesting and intelligent and wise. I just want to have this woman on the podcast. I just want to meet her in person. So this is like my way of making friends using my podcast. Don't tell the Holy Post staff I'm just bringing my friends on here. Go. But this is Marie Beecham. She is a writer who writes a lot about race and antiracism and those kinds of things. Welcome to the podcast, Marie.
Thank you so much for having me. You are my internet friend as well.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I first discovered you from your book, Reading While Black.
Oh.
And that was very pivotal in my life. So I know more about you than you do about me.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I also had the mistake of I made the mistake of also writing a memoir. So all of my best anecdotes are now public record. So everybody...
Right. I've read that too. So again...
So the people who care can know everything about me. It's like, hey, how'd you meet your wife? I'm like, it's chapter 7. Anyway, we play a game. We play a game on the podcast. And I actually have a shirt in honor of it. I may have to wear... I don't know if I can wear the wash t-shirt, wash sweater every day. It's a black company. I think it's a black company.
Yeah.
It's at least the black dudes who are on all of the stuff that I see. It was a bunch of dads who were thinking about the ways that dads are portrayed in the culture. And so it believes we are superheroes every day. But that's not the meaning of this game. The Are You Watch game for our podcast focuses on whether or not you are qualified to discuss the matter that's going to be the subject of the podcast. Now, this had never happened before. But if you fail the Are You Watch game, that's a possibility. We just stop the podcast. It's only 7 minutes long. No pressure, Marie, at all. Okay. But since we're going to be talking about anti-racism and DEI, I thought it might be fun before woke became kind of a thing that people got mad about and all of those things. Who were your favorite socially conscious woke characters or a TV show or even a movie, if you're not just a character? Who would it be for you? And I'm going to start off with one, and then you can give yours. I still got a whole list, and then maybe, Mike, do you have somebody?
I think I've got someone. Okay.
My first one is Denise Huxtable, the daughter from The Cosby Show. She was like super socially conscious. This might be an age gap thing. Have you ever seen any of the Cosby Show?
I've seen The Cosby Show, but my time was a lot more about I'd say Cosby Show to a prior generation was like Fresh Prince to my generation.
Okay.
So in Fresh Prince, they had lots of, moving the needle conversations.
Okay.
But yeah, I've seen The Cosby Show.
Okay. So who do you have? Who's your character who you chose?
This is my first thought, and I'm sure it's not what you're thinking of, and you probably haven't watched it. But my very first thought is the movie Ella Enchanted. It was like Anne Hathaway's breakaway role when she was like a teenager.
Okay.
And it was a movie from when I was young, and the whole synopsis of this Disney movie, it wasn't even like a theater movie. I think it was a Disney Channel original movie. She is advocating for the oppressed class, which is the ogres.
Okay.
And she wants to make her way to influence the prince, who's just, he's kind of empty-minded. He's a pretty boy. His name is Prince Char. And Ella wants to get in good with Prince Char to, point him in the direction of all sorts of
ogre oppressive
unfair treatment and discrimination and all sorts of things like that. I rewatched it probably a year ago, and I was like, I cannot believe how powerful this movie is.
Wait,
it holds up.
So wait, Anne Hathaway in Ella Enchanted was your introduction to socially conscious. The funny thing about it is I know that she's done a bunch of stuff, but I will never get over Anne Hathaway in Les Mis.
Oh.
And is she Fontaine or the daughter? What's the old?
No,
she's
her
the
name's
mom.
not.
Well, I forget it's
Yes.
the mom. But
She's Fontaine's mom.
Yeah, she's Fontaine's mom. I forget the name. I'm gonna get cooked for this on the internet. Fontaine's mom. This is what happens. Anyways, she sings "I Dream a Dream." Oh my goodness! I think that's the one, right? They cut her hair. Oh my goodness! And so, as a commentary on, I didn't know we had a singer on the podcast.
Yeah.
As a commentary on the slide down the economic ladder, obviously Les Mis. So maybe she has a whole catalog. Maybe we need to go back and revisit all of Anne Hathaway's stuff.
Just a correction, because we will get cooked on the internet. She does play Fontaine, who is the mother of Cosette.
Oh, yeah, Cosette's the mother. Okay, then. Thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. We can edit this so it can make me sound smart.
Well,
so I'm just...
That's so hard to do. If I had to edit every episode to make you sound smart, Esau, I couldn't do anything else.
We're going to have to even edit the part where you gave it to me. I'm just
Exactly.
cut in right here where it says Fontaine. Okay.
Exactly.
Do you have anybody, Mike?
All right, so the first one, similar to Maria, that came to mind, it was a movie I watched as a kid. I loved it. I remember renting it back when that was a thing and watching it over and over again. Coach Boone from Remember the Titans. Denzel Washington, first integrated football team at the school, and they hired Denzel to replace the white coach, and everyone was really mad, and all the players were fighting, and like he took the players to the Civil War, a Gettysburg site, and gave this inspiring speech. And,
there we go.
And the team won the championship. Spoiler alert: movie's 30 years old,
hold on.
But they won the state championship.
Slow down. Fantine dies in Les Mis. We're gonna start tossing out spoilers. Denzel might be in the socially conscious movie Hall of Fame. It's like there's probably like a bust of him and Sidney Poitier is like those are the two, right? Who lead the world. So I want to get through my list because nobody else had 5 of these, but I have a couple of them. So this is a deep cut. And for the 5 people who see the movie besides me, the dad from South Central who is trying to get his son out of the gang life, the entire cast of Do the Right Thing, whole cast, and Furious Styles and Boys in the Hood. If you've seen Boys in the Hood and you've seen Furious Styles, you'll get. Now, I will give this content warning because I didn't go back and rewatch any of these movies before I made this list. This is the barely sanctified memory of Esau when I was somewhere between 16 and 22. So if you go and you see something you didn't want to see, this is memory. Like I felt
this
like. Go ahead.
A reference is not an endorsement.
Yes, this is how I remembered wanting to make the world a better place after having seen these movies. Now, part of your work that you do when you're not giving us movie advice is that you actually are someone who describes himself as someone who's engaged in both DEI and antiracism. So before we go too far into this, someone said, give us a 30, 45 second definition of how you would define diversity, equity, and inclusion and or anti-racism. What would you say to someone, the elevator pitch as what you do and what it is?
Yeah. Well, broadly, I'd say DEI and anti-racism are big umbrella categories of people who are concerned by racial inequity, inequality, and are consciously working to make some kind of change. And I say people concerned because a lot of people who are concerned view things differently. People would categorize different things as anti-racism. People would choose different paths. And so I kind of see myself as one of many voices and more of a dissident voice in the sphere of anti-racism or DEI. But I very much still also present myself as being within that space. I'm not afraid to say, that's what I'm part of. That's what I do.
Yeah, and you're in the people who certain folks are mad at this moment. We'll get to that in a second. But everybody has an origin story as to how they got involved and concerned with this stuff. And I'll say this. I'll say a brief moment about my kind of origin stories. I don't know if I actually count as someone who has DEI and anti-racism. It isn't how I would describe myself, but I do care about issues of race and justice. And I'll talk about how this happened to me. And a lot of times I'll talk about in books and things about getting pulled over by the police or these inciting incidents. And that's an important part of my story. But what I really remember bothering me when I was in high school was the way that my high school was covered in the media. I was at the all black school on the rough side of town, and there was a white school on the other side of town, and they were always pitting our schools against one another. And there was never any consideration of poverty or the long-term socioeconomic things that had led to us becoming how we were, but we just see it as kind of a lesser form of people. And there were so many assumptions about what it meant to come from my high school, Geo Johnson High School in Huntsville, Alabama, that there was something about that just said, the way that the world talks about black people, because my high school was basically a way of talking about black people without saying black people, felt fundamentally broken. And I felt a strong sense, maybe from God, to push back on it. My mom talks about when I gave a speech. I didn't even remember this. I was talking about you with my mom when I was getting ready for this podcast. And she said, I was asking about when she first started, I got into this stuff. She said, when you gave a speech in front of the school board. Wow. To talk about how they cover my high school. So that's my origin story. How did you get involved in this work?
College had an effect on me that college has for like a lot of people.
Yeah.
And while I was in college, I tried my hand in all kinds of, committees, clubs, activism, things like that. But the real turning point was I made a post on Instagram.
Yeah.
While I was working at a shelter for homeless youth during a shift there, made a quick post, posted it, left, came back, and my phone was broken because it had gone so viral that
you literally broke your phone.
Change. Well, I couldn't open the Instagram app; it would just crash.
I've never been this viral before. Nobody likes my stuff. I'm sorry. Go ahead. It's like my mom is like smashing the like button. So it was like it was a moment. The same way that I found you is the way that the internet found you. So that's great.
Yes.
So. You talk a little bit in one of your posts about how when you first got into this, you went down like one progressive path and then you found out that wasn't exactly what you wanted to do. Can you say a little bit about your experiences around 2019 and 2020?
Yes. So in 2019, 2020, there was the big racial reckoning, lots of turmoil and tension. And I was really strongly connected with my faith and with the church. And so those are kind of different worlds, generally. But at that time, I felt like spiritual direction and the people around me, and especially a lot of white people in my life, didn't share my concern or my passion. Yeah. And so I really turned to, I would call them progressive antiracists. That's usually the term I use for counsel. So I started consuming all sorts of the best-selling books.
Yeah.
I started really leaning into them. And I kind of just took everything that was said at face value. And so then I became somewhat of a parrot for progressive anti-racism, but it was because it was the deepest wells I was presented with to draw from when it comes to the whole conversation.
I think that people don't understand I think your story there is a story that so many young African-American and just people in general had during this period of time. It's because it was at least for me, it was precisely my faith that led me to care about, the oppressed and suffering peoples of the world, including Black people. And then when you go to the people who you think ought to be your allies in this work, and you're told that this isn't something that you should care about as a Christian, often the fact that anybody who will acknowledge your pain feels like an oasis in a desert. Now, out of my frustration comes reading my Black, which I'm glad that you liked it. But that idea that so many people are just saying, I want someone who makes me feel like I'm not crazy. And it was the anti-racist literature that was there in that period. They were just available to people at the exact same time when people were saying, if you care about this stuff, you're a bad Christian. And so I think that conflict that was created there. But that ends up not being the entirety of your story. Now, how do you get from there, to what happens next? Like, how do you kind of come back from that place? So what was some of maybe I'll put it this way. What was it that made you question where you had wound up? Like, what changed for you? Why didn't you just stay and keep parroting all of those things?
Yeah, a big tenet of progressive anti-racism is that it's a real ethical package deal, that there's no imperfection. I thought it was an infallible approach. And once I started to encounter some counter arguments where I was like, oh, wait, I think we might be wrong about this one thing.
Yeah.
A lot of the message out there is you can't dissent, you can't disagree. If you do, you're part of the problem. And then I started to really feel like we were in dangerous waters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I felt like almost like I was faced with this option of either compartmentalizing and just like nodding along and going along with ideas that I didn't think were the best ideas, or kind of stepping out. And so it was this whole journey in my personal life happening simultaneously to my professional life. But it was really, I started to look for other answers, and I was surprised and shocked and upset that opposing views were sometimes pretty satisfying, sometimes stronger than what I had previously believed. That was actually pretty bad news at the time. But
so you have this quote. You're maybe I'm going to steal a quote from what you said on your Instagram, because all of your stuff is public, so I can just steal stuff. In the modern anti-racist movement, there's a strong emphasis on presenting a united front. Agreement is loyalty, dissent is betrayal. And I think this is what you were just referring to. And I think it's a hard place for African American, people who care about justice in general, is that you realize that this is such an important topic. And it feels like there are always people who are trying to discredit all movements for justice or all discussion of racism. So it feels like for the sake of unity, it's important for all of us to pretend to agree. And the idea that if you disagree with one tenement, one aspect of it, you can kind of get kicked off the entire team. That's a fear that kind of keeps people in line, because it's really hard to say in our current context, these two ideas are good and helpful. This idea is bad. And it's like you're either fully on board with everything or like off on everything. And one of the things that's really interesting about some of the stuff that you've written about, you talked about how two of the leading kind of anti-racist voices are actually in tension with one another. That's Abraham Kendi and was it D'Angelo? Is that her?
Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo.
Yeah, and so can you give us this to help people understand what we're talking about? Where are some places that these two people who are often presented as kind of our leading thinkers in this area, where are some places where they disagree?
Yeah. Well, and I'll start by saying I read all of their books and their works.
Yeah.
I read through them and didn't even clock disagreement. Like both of them on my first read through seemed like, perfect harmony.
Yeah.
But I've reread these books multiple times. And from that, you really get the sense that Ibram X. Kendi, he's known to define racism as doing anything that will work toward perfect equality of outcomes. That's his real strong emphasis. And so he says that Black people may be racist if they have reservations about policies that would achieve equality of outcomes. That's like a Kendi view. It's all about equality of outcomes. Black people may be racist. Other people of color may be racist. White people may be racist. Pretty much anyone who doesn't agree with his program of anti-racism is racist. Versus D'Angelo, she doesn't frame it as the pursuit of total equality. She is always talking about socialization.
Yeah.
And because it's about socialization, and she talks about like the positionality of knowledge, which is, she's saying that white people are racist. Yeah. Period. End of sentence. And that non-white people cannot be racist because of their position being marginalized, oppressed. And so those are very different things. There would be a lot of people or situations where they wouldn't come to a full or perfect agreement on who is racist or what is racist.
Yeah.
And even some detractors from D'Angelo have been people of color who have said, I disagree with this idea. Yeah. And by your own logic, I can't be wrong because in her perspective, a white person's point of view is the flawed one because they don't have the correct social position to attain the necessary knowledge. So sounds a little in the weeds, but
no, it's not, because
really
I was actually I was taught, and this is all before, like, it's funny when you learn about race before we get our catchphrases that then redefine the conversation. So when I was in college, I was taught that it was impossible for Black people to be racist.
Right.
Because racism has to have power. So I can not like a white person, but I have no economic power over them to implement it over an entire society. But because a white person can do structural racism, then that's how they define racism. I was like, well, that might be true. I've always thought, but anybody can sin racially, right? It could be the case that I could have a racial bias, but I may not have the power to implement that bias. But whatever you want to call that thing that I'm feeling, it is sinful. So even though before we kind of got to these conversations around the definition of racism and those kinds of things, this conversation was going on before this.
What if just 2 hours is all it takes to realize that God might be calling you to something more? What if 2 hours could shift your perspective and maybe even your calling? That's exactly what's happened for hundreds of people who've attended Taste of Northern, a free, live classroom experience from Northern Seminary. For over 100 years, Northern has been equipping leaders to engage the world with the gospel. And now, through Taste of Northern, you can sit in on a real seminary class via Zoom and experience the richness of theological education at no pressure with no cost. Coming up on April 28th and 29th, you can join one of 3 classes with leading New Testament scholars Dr. Nijay Gupta and Dr. Matthew Bates, or Old Testament scholar Dr. Ingrid Faro. These are real-time classes with real students and world-class professors, all from the comfort of your home. Sign up today at seminary.edu/taste. That's seminary.edu/taste. That's seminary.edu/taste. 2 hours, 3 different classes to choose from that just might change everything.
Field got him doing football numbers, only half is grown. He was acting grown.
So if you're someone who, how do you balance then? You want to say, there are certain things that I disagree with, and kind of the mainstream, I guess the orthodoxy. I don't know if they call it orthodoxy. The common consent around racism and anti-racism. How do you find your way into this work? What do you feel like it's your job to do? I'm assuming you're not the kind of person who's just saying everybody's wrong and all of this stuff is bad. Because, there's a lane for that for African-American or anybody who does anti-racist work, to be the person who makes everybody feel good and saying, no, let's not worry about anti-racism at all. But you actually have charted a different path. What do you feel like is your particular calling to do within this work?
Yeah. I think that my calling, it's interesting compared to your calling. Yeah. You reach a largely Christian audience.
Yeah.
And in your work, I found like a kindred soul. Oh. But I reached the opposite audience. And so I think of us as presenting people with opposite emphases.
Yeah.
Because we're talking to people who are coming from opposite perspectives. Yeah. And so me being a very, orthodox progressive anti-racist to start, I went viral. That's how I gained my entire audience. Then people are coming to me with a set of expectations that I will continue in the lane that I started in.
Yeah.
And so I've been on this long journey of realizing how I can best serve those people, best serve that group.
Yeah.
And I've swung too far one way, too far the next way. It's been a course of figuring out what that should look like. But ultimately, I feel like I'm only doing them a service if they trust that I'm with them and that I'm for them. I'm not just here to be contrarian just for the sake of it, but also that I'm presenting them with things they don't already think.
Yeah.
Because there came a point where I realized that in my desperation to be relevant, to be socially acceptable, I was just trying to figure out what my audience already thought so I could say that and be accepted, be embraced. And then I was like, what in the world am I doing? Especially if I think that this is a God-given platform, an assignment I've been given. I've completely gotten it backwards, completely undermined any good I could do with this by just trying to conform.
I make it a habit not to say anything about my kids or things on the podcast. So I won't use the story that was in my brain. But I will tell you, there is something, I'll talk about myself. I remember when I had a blog. This is like, I'm an old person. So Marie, you got to just be patient with me. And I remember there was a time when I had my blog and I could kind of tell who in my family had read it, if it was versus 15 people versus 20 people. And I never forget the time that I went to triple digits. I had 100 people reading my blog. And it was about, it was the doll, Doc McStuffins. It was about the dog,
yeah.
Doc McStuffins. And there was something, it must have been something about my daughter. But I remember I got to 100 and I said, I don't even know 100 people. So I'm like outside. I was like, do I need more dog content, right? There's this, this is like early Esau. Somebody's going to dig up all of these old posts. Like,
I'm going to find it.
I took it down. I took it down, but I'm sure that everything's forever on the internet. Yep. But the thing about it is there's this sense in which, and I say this to clergy all of the time. Here it goes, talking about my actual audience. Mm-hmm. If you know something is true and you don't say it because you're afraid of the audience, you've ceased to be a pastor or the congregation, and you're just an opinion poller. And there's a way in which social media can just become opinion polling. Like, this is what's hot, and this is like I am too old to dance on social media. I know that dancing is going to get the views up on our beloved platforms.
I keep trying.
But but I'm just not going to do that because I'm washed when it comes to moves. And so what I'm saying is, I think that you're getting at this real tension that exists in all of our lives as influencers. Now, you said one thing here that maybe gets to some of the stuff that you want to do. Here's another quote that I'm stealing from Marie from her social media. She says, "The right can't imagine how DEI could go right, and the left can't imagine how DEI could go wrong." So it seems like we're in this polarized moment where one group of people says that all diversity, equity, and inclusion work is literally of the devil, or maybe Marx, which is kind of like a proxy for the devil for some people, and the other people says anything that has diversity, equity, and inclusion anything that goes under that banner is good. So let me ask you this to kind of put you on the spot. Mm-hmm. Can you give me one example of something that DEI has done well, or something that goes under the banner of DEI has gone well? Can you give us an example of something that has gone poorly? Yeah,
I'll go with personal examples.
Yes,
and I'll start with the gone poorly, because DEI gone poorly in my own life, what would be a lot of the messaging in the progressive anti-racism movement places such an emphasis on racial identity that as a Black person of color, you can start to feel that race is so defining that there's this chasm between you and white people that you could never truly be in good relationship with them. And that's probably less DEI. Maybe I'm getting at anti-racism.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll take it.
Yeah, but racial essentialism is the mindset behind, back in times of slavery and times of segregation, that we are all essentially our race, and that our race is so essential to who we are, so defining, that we can never truly come together or relate or be in close relationship. We should always be segregated. We should always be separated. And through diving so deep into progressive anti-racism, I started to feel that way myself, that all white people were dangerous, that all white people were deeply problematic, that all small microaggressions were signals that I was, in a dangerous situation. I can clarify any of this if you're like, whoa, but
no, I think it's important to say not clarify would be the wrong word. I think that anyone who pays attention to your work understands you know the reality of racism. You know it's both as a structural and a personal thing. But even that concern about clarifying is, we have this fear that if we say things that we might even actually experience that goes against, like you said, the considered orthodoxy of this way of being, that we're just going to be pushed off. So I know what you mean. And anybody who listened to what you said in goodwill. And maybe that means that, like, maybe me and you can actually be friends, Mike.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Maybe though. Maybe. So
I'll pray about it.
What is, I mean, you haven't, have you seen Do the Right Thing?
I haven't. Maybe we should have a movie night.
No, we can't, because I can't rewatch any of these movies. I've tried to rewatch. There was one thing I sat down with my kids, said, we need to watch this movie. And we got like 20 minutes in. I was like, turn this off. I didn't realize. I was like, my mom had no language. I love my mother. God bless you, Mama, if you listen to the podcast. But she had no language issues at all. She just,
that's a universal experience. Our family movie nights would be parents are bringing back an old classic. Yeah. Parents are turning off said old classic.
So where's an example of it going well, though? We talked about it going poorly. Well,
And with the going poorly, I should specify, I'd say specifically the teaching for me that was so damaging was this idea of microaggressions.
Yeah.
That a small instance of racism is really harmful, and that when you feel harmed or offended, impact matters and intent doesn't.
Yeah.
And I actually got that through official teaching, all sorts of seminars through my college, all sorts of like professional training type things.
Yeah.
I was taught that as fact, that when a person of color feels harmed, we should only listen to the impact it had on them.
Yeah.
We should not consider the white person's intent. We shouldn't hear their explanation. And that led to a terrible series of events where I just felt like all of my relationships were fracturing.
Yeah.
And I was becoming increasingly fragile and easily offended and easily harmed.
Yeah.
And so like that's a specific teaching that is just, you're not supposed to question that. I think I'm the only person I know who does, who's in the lane that I'm in. But I think that it seriously affects your quality of life. So, to move on to the DEI that's gone really right, I would say I went to a church in my college town. My church was largely white, and there were a few Black people on staff, and they got together. They said, what if we gather together like all the Black people, like on Fridays, every other Friday, something like that. And we just pull up and eat good food and we hang out. We're not even going to put a lot of scheduling into this. We're not going to make it heavy. We're not going to make it deep. And it completely changed my life. It completely changed the lives of everyone else there. And we were all relating with our experience of feeling isolated, feeling alone, and feeling like we had been hurt by Christians. But by coming together and supporting each other, being hurt by Christians no longer meant being hurt by Christ. You know, we realized we were kind of getting our wires crossed there, understandably so.
Yeah.
And so it created this beautiful community. Then we expanded it to other people of color. And also people would bring their white spouses, their white children. Like it wasn't a truly exclusive gathering, but it was an intentional space for people of color. And I think a lot of churches would be wary of that. They would say, whoa, 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 why do we need to make anything about race?
Yeah.
But for all of us, it really brought us into the fold. And I think that it was beautiful. And it's something that more people, more places should do.
So you don't actually mention faith very much in your work. And you said earlier in the pre-show, that's been intentional. Do you find it, how have you managed to kind of communicate these values in ways that people who don't share your convictions might accept? What has been your strategy in how to, get this across without just pulling the Jesus card on people?
Yeah. Well, it's definitely trial and error. I ran hard into progressive antiracism. But then through a series of events, I joined this group where we had gatherings. Yeah. Our group read a book called Reading While Black.
Oh.
I've heard of that.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And through that, my faith just came alive, and it just seemed so central. Now it didn't feel like being a Christian was any kind of contradiction with being passionate about racial justice. Now it was like, oh my gosh, these two things go together so perfectly. We're image bearers. We're made in the image of God. Like
I'm feeling feelings now on the podcast. I'm trying to be. This is the reason why I wrote the book. Oh. So I will. I know. I remember coming back. Sorry, this is gonna. I feel like I'm gonna try not to feel too many feelings. I came back to the United States in 2016. I told the story 1,000 times, and I remember watching anti-racist protest. During this period, and I remember someone saying, it may have been 2016, it was sometime, I came back in 2016. I remember someone saying, this is not your parents' civil rights movement. And I was like, well, no, the civil rights movement was explicitly Christian. And I said, I'm worried there's going to be a generation of young Black Christians in particular, who can't reconcile their faith and their love for God with the concern for justice. Yes. And if forced to choose, they might have to say, well, I'll just not be a Christian then. Yes. And so I wrote that book to keep young Marie Beecham a Christian. It actually worked. I mean, through God, right? I'm not saying I actually did it, but the fact that you saw what I was attempting to do was a great encouragement. So you kind of, I forgot, what was the question I was asking? You just made me feel feelings.
How I came to the conclusion that my faith wouldn't necessarily be this.
How have you done it though? Maybe that's the question. Like, how have you sorry, go ahead.
So there was a time where it felt so essential, so central that then on my platform, which was an audience that was like entirely very progressive that I attracted, I started pulling the Jesus card, posting scripture.
Give them the Bible.
Left and right, read your Bibles, guys. And they were just like, what are you talking about? And understandably so.
Yeah.
And I talked to a spiritual mentor, and I thought he'd be so proud of me that I was going to persist in sharing my faith. This evangelism matters so much more. And he was just like, Marie, what are you talking about? Why would you steward this platform that God's given you with this specific subject matter, people eager to learn about race, and you would just pivot? That's the easy way out. You don't need to talk about Jesus. You need to talk about race in a way that a person who loves Jesus would talk about it.
Yeah.
And you need to not alienate your entire audience just for the sake of like ease and straightforwardness. And so that gave me a much richer, deeper assignment. And that's when I decided, in that case, I have a lot to learn, because I knew how to talk about race when I was just parroting what everyone else was saying. Then I knew how to talk about Jesus because I had a really strong like roots in my faith. Then I had to talk about race and really try to blaze a new trail and try to present a different kind of antiracism. So that path that I've been on has been the reason I have this conviction of not explicitly speaking about my faith. I also have a conviction about not explicitly speaking about a range of other issues. I see myself as having this narrow lane because that's what God assigned to me. And my narrow lane is I'll speak about race, racism, antiracism. And I especially focus on relationships between Black and white because those are the identities I hold. Those are the identities of my family. And I needed to really go narrow in order to build up any kind of expertise that would make what I'm sharing worthwhile. Because before then, the wider you swing, the more things you throw in. And I think this, and I think that too, and I think that too. It's more you're just handing out social cues to let people know you think like them.
Yeah.
But if you're going to try to change people's minds, you actually need to become an expert. You actually need to stay specific, and you owe that to your audience. And so it was trial and error and error and error and trial.
So the work that you do has actually gotten harder.
Yeah.
In the, last few months. I don't know when we would debate it, but you wrote somewhere else, the Trump administration decisions on race and DEI has jeopardized my career. Can you say a little bit about what it means to be an anti-racist during this administration and the kinds of challenges that you're currently facing?
Yes. And I'd say, as a prequel to this answer, my audience is largely progressive. And so I'm normally trying to convey a certain thing that would pull them in the direction of ideas they aren't considering. This audience, I don't think, is that. And so to listeners of this podcast, I'd say my big emphasis would more be about the severity of racism or, the threat that DEI is facing. And I think that there is some sort of understanding that I would like people to arrive at. And I'm putting a big emphasis on my audience in one way. But if I thought that my audience was people who might be more weird, like skeptical, hesitant, reluctant when it comes to anti-racism and DEI, I'd be sharing different things. And I do from time to time. But so that said, I talk a lot. Anti-racism can go wrong. Here's the ways it can go wrong.
Yeah.
But in a larger picture, that's for people who are convinced that it's needed, essential, important. And so, since the Trump administration, and I normally also have a rule, I don't usually mention political figures or political policies like by name with my work. I try to go more broad than that. Yeah. But this I had to carve out an exception because
a lot of people are carving out exceptions too. I remember, believe it or not, I once again try not to go beneath the hood, but even my own editors at some of the places that I work have said, Esau, you don't have to always pitch to us like Trump articles because that Trump is such a news-defining figure that it could be the only thing that you think about. And so my editors in across publications, not just one, have said, feel free to talk about a variety of things because it can feel like that's the only topic. And so I have noticed that in your own work, but you did, like I said, you carved out the exception. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about like how this is impacting you.
Yeah, there was an immediate change. And I always say, let's not be alarmist, folks. Everybody thinks that this new thing, this thing that happened, it's going to change our lives forever. And I'm always like talking people down from that.
Yeah.
But when Trump signed an executive order with all of these things, banning DEI, banning race, all of those things, it took effect immediately. My own friends, my own family members, there was an immediate effect in their jobs, in their clubs and committees. Like so many things changed that week that I couldn't believe it. I was getting calls from friends, from all sorts of people. Their companies were cutting half their positions.
Yeah.
Their thing that they had been advocating for to ensure a good thing happened, now they weren't even allowed to do that. And now those people weren't going to be helped in any way. And I was just like, okay, this is alarming. This is newly alarming. And then I felt effects in my work where projects and things that had been underway, people came to me and said, I'm so sorry, but from the top of the food chain, we're actually not allowed to do this anymore. And these were things that I had worked toward for a very long time.
Yes.
And I also say, I think that these impacts, I always try to caution, like, this is a huge issue for now. I don't mean to spread fear-monger, anything like that these will be issues forever. But I was just baffled by the immediate effect that it took in my life and the lives around me, by how it greatly affected some of the most meaningful, important work I'd be doing in my career. And just also the contradiction of the executive order itself. The executive order took aim at things that I have also voiced concern with, like they mentioned unconscious bias by name. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about unconscious bias. I talk about that a lot. They mentioned white privilege by name. I think that the concept of white privilege needs a whole lot of workshopping. I don't think that it's definitively good and true. I think it's something we need to engage with nuance. But the terrible contradiction in this executive order was that it named that they were trying to eliminate echo chambers, and by eliminating a whole range of topics, and then also mandating in one fell swoop patriotism and positive views of history and all sorts of things. Mandating is just as much of an echo chamber as those. The bans and the mandates have more in common than you'd think. And so it said, we've been mandating DEI. We shouldn't do that anymore. Now let's mandate patriotism instead and ban DEI. And I was.
So it's a different kind. It's another form of kind of enforced uniformity. And they're saying, we will speak from one way to the other. And so now, because they believe that there was a false perception of the United States, they're now going to interpret American history and mandate that interpretation of American history. But one of the things that I think is important for us to realize is that this stuff isn't just an abstraction. This is actually someone's life. And that people who've dedicated their lives to it and people who are trying to have important, nuanced conversations are the people who are being impacted. Because it's easy for us to turn DEI and anti-racism into all the things that you don't like.
Right.
And when you do that, you end the possibility of reform. Now, we have this thing. Did you want to add anything?
I mean, can I just ask one thing, Marie? I felt like, I'm in the white evangelical camp of like someone who read all the books in 2020 and wanted to do good, wanted to make the changes needed. And then, exposed to very progressive views on this. And I'm like, oh, whoa, that just seems a little too far. And I just know people in my community then tended to just kind of go, never mind, throw it all out.
Right.
So I know this is like the impossible question. Can you give like a 1 minute nuanced view of
1 minute?
Why? I mean, you can do it longer than that, but like, why should we not throw the baby out with the bathwater for DEI? What does a nuanced view of DEI look like? And why should white evangelicals lean into it rather than just saying like, never mind, I'm not doing any of this?
Well, Esau is known to talk about how racism is a sin issue. And so if we see racism as this collective sin, then DEI is the best thing we've got going for addressing it, for remedying it. And I also think an important thing to have is, progressives are really about embracing and understanding your collective identity. You are a white person in this social position. You are a Black person in this social position. And they emphasize that really strongly versus most white evangelicals want to more identify with their individual identity, their individual character, their individual attributes. But I think that there's a real biblical model for seeing collective responsibility and individual responsibility. They have some sort of relationship together. And with a lot of people say we should just preach the gospel and we shouldn't get caught up in justice and we shouldn't do this and that. But, a story like mine, or like all of the other Black Christians at my church, was it felt impossible to feel like I belong or like I relate in Christian spaces when that wasn't being fully addressed. And I didn't feel like I was considering leaving the church, but I did feel like I might be being pushed out. And I'm not saying that that's the case from any one deliberate action or anything like that. But I think that for white evangelicals, I totally see the let's throw the baby out with the bathwater thing. But I'm really encouraged by those who care a heck of a lot about justice and those who try to do their due diligence and those who aren't afraid to wade into the space of talking about race, because throwing the baby out with the bathwater feels like an option when race doesn't feel so relevant. But the issue is that racism makes race relevant for people of color and Black people. And so a lot of white people want race to be irrelevant. And I think that's the end goal of anti-racism. I think that ought to be that we don't even give a single thought to race. Why are we talking about this? We should be colorblind. I do think that's in some ways, I wouldn't go as far as like blind to differences, but it should be a lot less salient, a lot less impactful. But the only way that can even be achieved is if we reduce the weight that's felt because of racism, because of experiences with racism that individuals have, because of things that are happening at the national and political level that are deeply upsetting to people of color. The more racism there is, the more that race just keeps feeling relevant. Yeah. And that's why we've seen that during the Trump years, kind of both times now. Yeah. Race just becomes so top of mind. And white evangelicals who are saying, I wish we weren't talking about this all the time. I agree. Everyone agrees with you.
Yes, we agree.
We agree. But I think that it takes a lot of action to get to the place where we can really lay the whole deal to rest.
So we often or sometimes close the podcast.
Often or sometimes.
Often or sometimes, depending. Whenever I come up with a new thing, I just pretend like I've always thought of it. So this is like 3 weeks old, but I like it. It's called, you have two options. It's called standing on business. That's what you're saying. Actually, this thing is really good, even though people are wrong about it. Or it's a moment of cultural shame. You can confess something that you can't do that people assume that you ought to be able to do. I confessed at one point that I can't do the electric slide. That was my moment of cultural shame. So in honor of having you on the podcast, I'm going to once again confess in my moment of cultural shame. During the heady days of 2019, 2020, there was a book that everybody was reading. It was called Right Fragility.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Esau did not read that book.
Oh, wow.
I have never read it. I've picked up context clues, but I must confess that I have not read Right Fragility. And there's a lot of the books that everyone says you have to read that I didn't read, but we're not going to list all of them.
Guess you're not very woke after all, Esau.
I would not pass the woke reading list. But yes, I must confess, I didn't read White Fragility.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, so do you have a moment of cultural shame, or are you gonna reaffirm? Are you gonna say no? White Fragility, it's great. I don't know which way you about to go here. What is your thing?
I am scrambling because even though Esau says we do this all the time, I still never come prepared with an answer. Okay, I'm gonna say cultural shame. I don't know if I have anything race related. Does it have to be race related?
It doesn't have to be race related. It doesn't have to be race related. This is a safe place.
Can I say this? I don't like the Lord of the Rings.
Oh my goodness! You're just gonna drop that at the end of the podcast.
And like, wow. Let me clarify. I'm not saying I just haven't seen the Lord of the Rings.
Whoa! You watched it and you don't like it?
I've seen the movies and I think,
wait.
Too long. They needed a better editor.
Wait. You saw the original version and you didn't want the extended cut?
I saw the extended cut.
Oh, okay, man. Yeah, that's like the best version.
Yeah, and it was... so here's what happened. My friends in college, same reaction you all had, made me watch the extended version.
That's what you need.
3 nights in a row.
Yeah, okay.
I dedicate... What is that? 12 hours of my life.
That's 12 hours of your life.
And the worst part is it gets to the end of the last one, right? And although not the end, there's probably another hour after this scene. Frodo gets to the mountain to throw the ring in.
Wait,
and he goes,
spoiler alert.
And he goes, no, I can't do it. And I stood up and I'm like, throw the stupid ring.
Oh, no.
And it's been 12 hours.
Okay.
Enough is enough.
Okay.
So
we're gonna have Maria come in a second.
Yeah.
Marie.
You're good.
As best as I can understand this, you're paid by Holy Post whether or not you're on the podcast or not, right? I'm suspending you for 3 weeks, one for each episode of The Lord of the Rings because you just trashed. Maybe it'll keep going for The Hobbit because there's 6 of those too.
Oh my gosh.
But at least 3 weeks you're suspended. That's it. That's it.
You can't go 3 weeks without me, Esau.
You can't quit me. Okay, I'm sorry. I can't. Man, you're disrupting the podcast. Marie, do you have a moment of cold? You don't have to. But this is a safe place.
Apparently not. Okay. I just got suspended for my culture.
Mine's certainly not as shameful as not liking Lord of the Rings.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I just have to say I love Lord of the Rings and I've read all the books and I read books about Tolkien and I watch all the behind the scenes.
You're invited back on the podcast anytime you would like to come.
Yeah,
we might need another co-host.
Yeah,
I'm not the co-host. As you've...
I can swing through Naperville.
Oh, you're right. Okay, I'm sorry, Marie. We'll not let you talk. What is your moment of cultural shame or standing on business?
My moment of cultural shame is that I have never kept social media on my phone since 2020. I only download it to post, which happens once every 1 or 2 weeks, and I'm fully deleted otherwise.
That's not shame. That's
cultural glory.
And
moment of cultural glory.
Man,
but it means I'm desperately out of the loop.
That's not a bad thing.
Next to
that's the reason why you didn't get the message when I was trying to send you a message because she's look at
exactly.
This. I think we're gonna have a new segment, a moment of cultural glory, something that makes you like slightly holier than all of us. I tried to do that, but I post 2 or 3 times a day.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I keep re-downloading it. Well,
someone's got to.
Marie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It was great to have you, and I will reach out to you via non-social media means if we want to have you on again. Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
The Esau McCaulley podcast is a production of Holy Post Media, produced by Mike Stay Low, Stray Low. If you know, now you know. Edited by Seth Gorbett, like a Corvette. Music by Rob Knorr. Make sure to follow the show wherever you get your podcast and leave a review so more people can find it. See you next time. I'm out.
I'm penning these letters with prayers they can aid your endeavors. It's clever benevolence, tasted it, wrestle with, still wrestling. Touch my side and it crushed my pride and told me I'm blessed within. Receive a Christian platitude with gratitude, but in the saddest news I live in doesn't add up to the Beatitudes. Catch me in the catacombs, chiefing like they Pat Mahomes, catching bullets, tackle foes, running plays, defending zones. Field got them doing football numbers, only half is grown. He was acting grown.